Hello, welcome back to Wyver Minis. I'm Dan, and I'm going to be talking about the Rynn's World scenario that Games Workshop put out for the 35th anniversary of Warhammer 40,000. This little scenario, I think, is a great idea. It takes elements of the older versions of Warhammer 40,000 in terms of having a games master, and combines it with the newer version of the rules. I mean, obviously this is based on 9th edition because it came out prior to the release of 10th edition, but you know, it's along the same lines. I think it's a great example of how you can take different bits of rules and stick them together and make them work really well. And the reason I was excited about it was twofold. Firstly, I've got a couple of mates who have played a little bit of 40k in the past, and this is a really good way to introduce them to it, because I could act as the impartial referee, judge, games master, make sure the game runs smoothly, helping them out with the rules, without, you know, saying, let's play a game against each other and I'm going to beat you because I know all the rules and you don't, which isn't much fun for anyone. And secondly, I get to get the Orks out, because I am an Ork player through and through, and so far on this channel, haven't had any Orks. There's been a distinct lack of them, so finally we've got some. This was a really good excuse for me to paint a few new Orks, get a few older ones kind of spruced up for the new edition, because I really wanted to make sure that we had a good looking couple of armies. I was going to try and paint the Space Marine side of it as well, but I didn't have time, and one of the guys already had some Ultramarines, so we were covered there. So in terms of the Ork forces, the first component, as always, is boyz. Mob of slugger boys and a mob of shooter boys. You can see that the slugger boys I painted up a long time ago, and the shooter boys needed painting, so I undercoated them with Death Guard green. So the slugger boys are led by this knob, Dagrat. He's a old Gorka Walker knob with an additional bigger chopper from a war boss and a power claw. I think the old Gorka Walker models just have so much character. I love putting them in amongst the newer models. I think they're great. The only thing I needed to do with these slugger boys was change the base size, and I'd always said I wasn't going to go around rebasing all my Orks, but actually they do look pretty good on 32mm bases, and I got these adapters that you just stick on the base to turn it from 25 to 32. So all I had to do with the slugger boys was just stick on the adapter and then fill the gap. Most of my Orks are painted with a kind of dusty grey base, representing the ash wastes of some destroyed city or whatever that they've been stomping around. So I could just use the Astro Granite texture paint to fill in the gaps, a little bit of a wash, tidy up the rim of the base, job done. That's the slugger boys all sorted and ready to war. Apologies for the slightly shaky camera. This footage is a bit old. I'm cobbling together some old bits and pieces because I did this quite a while ago. So in terms of the shooter boys, I assembled this knob because, as far as I was concerned, shooter boys with a combi rocket knob is a good idea, but the scenario calls for a combi scorcher, which is also a good option for a knob, especially if he's getting up close and personal. So I assembled one from various bits and pieces, put a few extra dead Space Marine helmets and stuff on, because I really wanted to hammer home the fact that we're fighting the Ultramarines. Not we, I should be impartial. Not really. Anyway, the shooter boys I was painting up from this Death Guard green spray paint, using contrast paints on them, and I found that the contrast paints actually flowed very well over the top of the green. You don't necessarily have to use the official contrast paint undercoats. That's something that I've learnt while I've been using contrast paints. They do work very well, you know, the slap chop method of black and then dry brushing up, or doing what I normally do, which is spraying black and then doing a kind of zenithal spray with the wraithbone over the top, or just having flat wraithbone, you know, that can all work really, really well. But contrast paints actually work very well over other colours, particularly metallics, so you can get really nice effects. I found with maybe having a metallic green wall I've done, or you know, any kind of terrain pieces I've done spraying them silver and then metallics over the top. It's a good way to get a nice kind of bronze or a nice gold actually, and you get that shading that contrast paint gives you at the same time, which is handy. With the Orks, I wanted to use the green undercoat because of the skin colour of the Orks, surprisingly enough. And I used to agonise for hours about how to paint Ork skin, trying to get them all the same and trying to highlight the musculature and all that kind of stuff. And it was really caused me a bit of paralysis actually in terms of painting, and that's part of the reason I've got such a massive pile of grey plastic, is because of trying to decide how to paint things and trying to get them just perfect. I think what I've realised is it doesn't have to be perfect. Get them painted, you know, and then if this 10 lot of Orks aren't the best, do another 10 and get it better next time. When they're all on the tabletop together, if you've got a bunch of Orks, a whole army that's painted, and some of it is perhaps a little bit substandard and some of it's better, it shows your evolution as a painter, and it won't be that noticeable, and it's much better than having grey plastic on the table anyway. That's my opinion. But I also came to the realisation with Orks, several realisations occurring to me during this video. I came to a realisation that they don't all have to have the same skin tone. People don't, so why should Orks? I mean, there's obviously the lore in the background where the smaller greenskins, snotlings, grots, goblins, they tend to have lighter green colour skin. Orks have darker green, and generally the bigger Orks, black Orks, knobs, war bosses, things like that, will tend to have even darker skin. But there's still a massive variation there, and I think if you lock yourself into that too much, it perhaps becomes a little bit too restrictive. So I intentionally tried a few different skin tones with these Orks, just to have a bit of variation within the mob, and also to see which ones I liked more than others. And some of them I thought were great, some of them not so good. I think it was about 3 different skin tones I used on this mob of 10. And because I was using washes and contrast paints, it didn't take a long time to do that. It wasn't a difficult process. And one of the things I like about Orks is they can look quite anarchic and variable in the squads. They're a load of individual hooligans at the end of the day, which is one of the things that I think is hilarious about them. And sometimes it's quite good to have a bit of a uniform. Certainly with goths, you want to be focusing on the sort of blacks, greys, whites, bit of splash of red as well. But if you stick to that restricted palette, they can look sort of uniform and also not at the same time. So they look like a cohesive force, but also they look like a mob of mental Orks, which is great. So I'm really pleased with how these came out. The Slugger Boys I had earlier, they're much more uniform in the way I painted them, because I wanted to make them really as quick as possible. But using the contrast paints really speeds things up. And I found that the opacity was pretty good on the contrast paint, so it actually went over the green, especially using these browns, the dark browns, dark blacks, and all those kind of colours I was using, went straight over the green paint without really picking up too much of the colour behind it. And then at the end of the day, I put a wash on them all as well. I use the Army Painter Quick Shades, and I use the Strong Tone, which is brown, water it down a little bit, put that over the top of the contrast paints, and it just gives you even more depth to the recesses very quickly and easily. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how these came out. Okay, you got your boys ready. You need to get some knobs in there to lead them. And Hruk is the name of the knob with War Banner in this scenario, as provided the army list. I was quite tempted to use Mikari because I had recently painted up the new big Gagskor model with Mikari, but I decided to use the old Gagskor model with his little Mikari. I decided to put them on the base together. I got them off eBay. Always loved that model and thought, he's on the wrong size base to be a knob with War Banner, but he looks so cool. He's going to be Hruk, so that'll be that. And in terms of the War Boss, Throg Bullneck, I was quite tempted to use my old converted Gazgul. I converted this model a long time ago, did a bit of green stuff work on it, made that power claw with scythes from the Skeleton Warriors kit, Made him a big sword. I mean, I spent quite a while converting the old metal war boss. I tend to use him just as a war boss in Mega Armor. I called him Gul Scrag Thraka, and he says that he's Ghazghkull's cousin, and nobody better argue with him, otherwise he'll nut them. Based on the Hive Tempest story battle in one of his Wars for Armageddon, when he fought against the Salamanders, actually made out of a Chaos Biker and Alpha Legion shoulder pads, which I thought looked quite salamandery, but don't tell anyone about the heresy there. Anyway, I really like that old conversion I did, really proud of it at the time. But the new war boss in Mega Armor was out, and I thought, let's take the opportunity to get him painted up, because it's a great model. I mean, I'm a bit sad that the option for a Power Claw is gone, and I hope that comes back in the Codex. Huge Chopper looks alright, but it's not quite as cool as a Power Claw. But overall, that model is just stonking. It's yeah, proper good. So here he is next to the knob for the shooter boys, all painted up, and that's pretty much the army ready to go. So I've got the two knobs here that I made for the shooter boys, so I can change them around and have a couple of mobs of shooter boys, which is always useful. And this is it, the Slugger boys ready to go. I'm pleased with them, even though they're quite old. Like I said, I think they look good. I think they stand up next to the rest of them. I really like that knob, the Gorkamorka knob is brilliant. The shooter boys, pleased with them. They were very quick to do with the contrast paints over the green, and I think the finish is great, so I'm going to be using that method going forwards for painting my other orcs. Got plenty to do, so hopefully I'll get some more painted up very soon, and they'll be done. Yeah, that war boss, he's just great. I was pleased with that as well. Again, lots of contrast paints on him, and a few extra bits and pieces on his base just to make him look interesting, like he smashed some things up. And that's the metallic with the contrast paint on to get that kind of brassy colour that I mentioned earlier. My old school Ghazghkull, just such a classic model, using him as the knob with wire banner. The wire banner there is actually made from an Ardboy boss shield, or Black Orc boss shield, depending on how old you are. Yeah, I really like the base there. He's just a cool thing. I really like Ghazghkull. So that's the basic army there ready. It's only a small force. Next video I'll do a little bit on the getting the battlefield ready, and then the game itself. We actually played the scenario twice with a couple of different people, yeah, it was a really good little way to introduce people to the rules of 40k in a nice sort of gentle fashion, and having the Games Master role is something quite novel and interesting. So yeah, if you like and subscribe the video, it'd be much appreciated, and I'll see you next time.